Hi, my name is Celie and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing the mid-year freakout tag or the mid-year check-in, and we're going to talk about all of the books that I have read this year that were surprising, that made me cry, that I loved, that I was disappointed by, and what I am prioritizing for the rest of this year. So let's get into it. So there are traditionally a couple prompts with this tag, and I like to do them backwards because actually the first question is your favorite book of the year, and I feel like that is leading with the best first. So I'm going to do them in reverse, and we're going to start off with some stats. So these stats are courtesy of Fable. I am both on Fable and on Goodreads, and I use both to track my reading, but I love how Fable really puts the stats into little visuals. So I have read 44 books this year with an average rating of 3.7 stars. I don't hold myself to a specific reading goal because I think quality over quantity is always the goal, but I do kind of aim to read around 50 books a year, so I'm only 6 books away from reading those 50, and currently it is July, so that's looking pretty good in my opinion. I think my strongest reading month was in March. I read 11 books. I read 11 books in March. Is that correct? No, I read 10 books in March, which is insane of me. So that's pretty cool. And in terms of genre, I've read 21 romance books, 16 fantasy, 9 general fiction, 5 young adult, and 4 sci-fi books. Those are some pretty strong stats. I think I have the most 5-star reads, which is always the goal. We're always hoping to read 5-star books, but you know, you can never, they can't all be 5 stars. And most of these I really enjoyed. So let's jump into the books. So starting off with the last question, which is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So I have many books that I need to read before the end of the year, but these are the ones that I am really prioritizing at this moment. I just started Catabasis, I don't know, by R.F. Kuang. I was lucky enough to get this arc, and it's really good so far. I just hit page 100 and I'm loving it. So this is a high priority right now, especially to read it before the release. Another priority of mine is to reread City of Brass so that I can continue and finish this series. This is the first book in the Dayavabad series. I've read this book twice now, which I don't typically reread books, but I read it one time and then I reread it another time to continue with the series, and then I didn't, and here I am once again rereading one of my favorite books so that I can actually keep reading this series. So I think I'm about 20% in. I am taking my sweet time since this is a reread and I know already most of what's happening. I have a lot of other books that I'm currently reading right now, so this is something I'm prioritizing. And then another arc that I want to read before its release is A Theory of Dreaming. This is the sequel to A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I also got this advanced copy recently and I really want to read it before its release in August, so prioritizing this one this month. Now moving on to the most beautiful books. This can be interpreted in many ways, but for this one specifically, I'm interpreting it both as most beautiful in its prose as well as the cover, and I actually have 2 books that meet this. But then I also have one where it's a good cover, but the prose specifically is what hit me. So first we have Water Moon. This gorgeous edition, I think it's from Illumicrate. Yes, it's from Illumicrate. It is stunning. I absolutely am in love with this beautiful edition, but also the writing is gorgeous. The story is just so delicious. It just eats you right up and pulls you into it, so loved this one. Then for like good cover, but like mostly for the story, Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Good cover. Not what I would consider a beautiful cover, but solid cover, and the story and the plot of this is so incredible. I devoured it in 2 days. And then another one that is beautiful both inside and out is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I loved this story and the cover is just drop dead gorgeous. This is a Fairy Loot edition. I mean, look at that. Isn't that absolutely incredible? Oh my gosh. And this has the original cover underneath it as well, which I love when they do that, because then you can have both the original cover and the exclusive cover in one go. Look at this tortured man. Oh, incredible. So loved this story, loved this romance, and this cover is just so beautiful. Then what is a book that made you happy? So I have a couple for this as well. Each of these prompts has a couple books attached to it because I simply could not choose. When you've read 44 books and you've enjoyed most of them, it's hard to choose. But for this one, First Time Caller by B.K. Borison made me incredibly happy. I think I read this in a day or two. I love this. I tapped it in a few places. This is just such a beautiful, cute romance, and I loved the characters. The setting is in Baltimore, which is very near where I live, so this was just such a fun time and made me smile. Then another book by B.K. Borison is Business Casual. So this is the 4th book in the Love Light Farm series. They don't need to be read in order, but they are interconnected romance books that take place in the same cute little small town. So if you don't want to be spoiled for what relationships get together in the other books, you should read them in order, but otherwise it really doesn't matter. This little town is just so sweet and neighborly and just gives you so many cozy vibes, and it's just so lovely to escape into this world and just be there with these characters. I love B.K. Borison's writing. Her romances are so comforting and real, and it made me happy. And then the last book that made me happy is The Great British Bump Off. This is a graphic novel that is by the same creators as Giant Days, which is one of my favorite graphic novel series of all time, but also one of my favorite books of all time. And they just created this new series, and it is Agatha Christie as like a little murder mystery meets the Great British Bake Off. So it is this baking show where there is a murder and someone dies and they have to figure out how it happened, and it is just so cozy and comforting while also being really exciting, and is so cute, and it just melds these worlds together so well. And the next volume is coming out in like a month, and I'm so excited. So that one made me really happy. Next is a book that made you cry. So I haven't cried a lot. I think I've cried with 3 books this year. The first was with The Undocumented Americans by Carla Conejo Villavicencio. This is all about the people who immigrated to America who were undocumented, and all about their lives as people, not just focusing on them as workers as other stories have. And it's just so beautifully written, and it captures all these different stories about these people's lives and their families, why they left their home countries, why they came to the US, why they decided to stay. And there's one section that is talking about the day laborers who worked on Ground Zero after 9/11 and who did the cleanup for it, who weren't provided any protective gear, and so many of them had to deal with terrible consequences afterwards. And also about the undocumented workers who worked in those buildings or next to those buildings, or who went into those buildings to make deliveries that morning and were never heard of again and weren't listed on any of the logs because they were undocumented, so they weren't registered in any systems, because that could have gotten them in trouble with the authorities. And here's just, let me just read this excerpt that just tore my heart out. You take out your wallet and put an ID between your teeth so they can find you when it all collapses. Your flesh may burn, but your teeth will remain, and the ID will be there. It's a fake ID. Nobody will ever know you died. Nobody will ever know you lived. So that hit very hard. Highly recommend this book. So that was the hard cry. There are 2 other books where I cried a little bit because it got really emotional with the storytelling. One is in Say You'll Remember Me, which is a contemporary romance by Abby Jimenez. This one deals with a family member who has dementia and being a caretaker for a loved one. And there's a section towards the end, and without spoiling it, this section talks about different ways how you find yourself on your career path and how things lead from one point to another. And there's a little full circle moment that hit really hard while I was on the train in Japan. And the most recent cry was when I was reading Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a beautiful and emotional story, and this is a story that's interspersed with moments from the past leading up to this really big event in the current day of the book in like the 1980s. And it's really emotional, and there are a couple scenes towards the end that just tore at my heart in beautiful ways. Then for new favorite characters, we have Bartholomew in The Knight and the Moth. Bartholomew is a stone gargoyle who calls everyone Bartholomew, and no one is sure why. The stone gargoyle doesn't have a name, he's just called Gargoyle, but I feel like readers just call him Bartholomew at the end because he calls everyone else Bartholomew. And through the story you find out who he is and more about his life, and that's all I'll say. And then Kaz from The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. Kaz is a sentient plant who is just so sweet, and I love him. For newest fictional crush, whoever the male character is in this, Aiden Valentine in this. I love how he is trying to figure out what he wants in life. I love how he communicates, and he just sounds lovely. And honestly, I didn't love her at the beginning, but she definitely became a crush towards the end of the book. Carrie Soto in Carrie Soto is Back. I love her, I don't know if gumption is the right word, or like her spunk, her general attitude. She's called a bitch throughout it multiple times, and she's unapologetic of who she is and what she's going for in life, and I'm obsessed with that, and I definitely have a crush on her. And then I have a crush on both the Lady Knight as well as the Knight in this one. So in this, Sybil, who's the diviner who becomes a Lady Knight, and who's the guy? Roderick. Love both of them. Next, for new favorite author, I think it definitely would have to be Rachel Gillig, who wrote The Knight and the Moth, or Rebecca Ross, who wrote the Divine Rivals series. And I read the Divine Rivals and I really enjoyed that one. She wasn't really a new favorite author at that time. I did just finish Ruthless Vows, which I enjoy, but not as much as the first one. But what really cemented her as a new favorite author is her newest release, Wild Reverence, that comes out in a couple months. I read the e-arc for that one and it blew me away. Loved that book. Biggest surprise this year would be Carrie Soto is Back. I actually started this and got maybe halfway like 3 or 4 years ago, and I just got distracted and never finished it. And this year I'm trying to finish a lot of the books that I started and never finished. Not necessarily ones that I DNF'd, because DNFing a book is perceived as a much more permanent thing, but these were more soft DNFs where I got just distracted by other things and just never finished them. So I was really surprised how much I loved the second half, so much more than the first. For biggest disappointment, I have 4 books. First of which is And Yet. This isn't my biggest disappointment, but it was definitely disappointing. This is a collection of poems. I got this as an ARC a while back, just hadn't gotten to it yet. And this was something I was really looking forward to. Apparently this book talks about motherhood, friendship, love, loss, and the remarkable evolution of a writer and artist working on her craft. None of this was in here. This was honestly felt like very elementary poetry, and none of it connected with me. All of it felt very basic. I felt disconnected with all of it. I also was a little disappointed by Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. I loved the concept and the characters, and honestly the page count too. It's fun to read a novella and a short story every once in a while. I love novellas and short stories. However, it felt like it just didn't reach a full conclusion. It felt like there was a lot more that could have been explored, and maybe for 50 extra pages it could have really fleshed out the storyline more. One of the most disappointing reads was Evocation. This was such a bummer. I hadn't read anything by S.T. Gibson. S.T. Gibson is the same author of A Dowry of Blood, which I haven't read yet, but many people have raved about. And this sounded so cool. This is about sorcerers and secret societies in Boston, and it sounded so cool. And the plot did not start until maybe the 90% mark. 90%. There was barely any plot. They were just running around doing things. There was this really messy relationship that I kind of was aware would be coming when I picked up the book. It's kind of vaguely referenced in the summary, and you get a strong feeling for it when the book starts. But the relationship did not work for me at all. It was weird. It didn't fit. It didn't make any sense to me. I just didn't understand why it was happening. And just the whole book, I was waiting for it to end. But I was also so curious where the hell the plot was that I also really had to keep reading. And the last biggest disappointment is A Dagger in Vicky, which is an e-arc I requested specifically because it sounded so cool. It's like fantasy, medieval-ish times about this traveling theater group, and they're doing these performances, but there's also something really weird happening at the same time. And it's a novella, and it sounded so cool, and it just wasn't it. Like, the writing was so clunky. I didn't care about any of the characters. The plot was it just didn't add up. It felt so out of left field and didn't make sense. And the conclusion, don't even get me started. All right, my most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. I have many, but we're just gonna focus on a few. So Good Spirits by B.K. Borison, one of my favorite authors of all time. This is a retelling of The Ghost of Christmas Past, I think, and it's a romance and it sounds incredible. Then The Princess Knight, which is in this like micro trend of lady knights, which I'm loving. Isle of the Silver Sea is also a lady knight book that is coming out later this year. And then, as I already mentioned, Calabasas and Theory of Dreaming I am currently reading and I'm very excited about. Then a couple new releases that I have not read yet, but I really want to. First of all, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. I actually just joined a local book club, and this is one of the upcoming picks for it, so I'm very excited to read this for that. And then we have The Prince Without Sorrow. This is the Illumicrate edition, which is gorgeous, but also I love the original cover of it. So if I love this, I will get the original cover as well, but I will not do it yet until I've read the book, because I have made this mistake before where I get 2 copies of the same book and then I don't end up even reading it or enjoying it. And I'm not doing that anymore. I'm only doing that for books that I love, but this one sounds incredible. And then also Gifted and Talented by Louise Blake. This is the Fairy Loot edition, and it is gorgeous. Here is the original cover. Then there's also Windweaver, which I talked about in my anticipated releases video for the first half of 2025. Digging Dr. Jones, which I have a digital copy of that I really want to read. Mercy Makers was also on my anticipated releases list. The River Has Roots, also on said list, and I have a digital copy of. And Ladies' Night, which is different from The Princess Knight, but is also about lady knights. The second to last question is, what is the best sequel you read this year? And I've only read like one official sequel, which is Ruthless Vows from the Divine Rivals series. And I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. So I am instead going to talk about Bite by Bite, which isn't necessarily a sequel, but it is in the similar vein of another collection of prose poetry that Amy Nes Kukudamatahil wrote. The other one was World of Wonders. So World of Wonders was specifically prose poetry about things in nature, animals, plants, and this is specifically about food, and I loved this. This was incredible. Gorgeous stories about different kinds of food and dishes and beverages, and all of these gorgeous illustrations throughout as well. Look at that. Look at the pawpaw. I'm obsessed. Incredible. Now the moment we've all been waiting for. What has been my favorite book of the year so far? And that has to go to The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. As I already said, I loved this book. It was beautiful inside and out. I loved the story, the romance. It was funny, it was heartfelt. I read it in the span of a couple of days, and it's just one of those books that I'm going to now be recommending to everyone that I know going forward. If you love things about humans divining the will of the gods, lady knights, adventures, talking gargoyles, talk about destiny, romance, this was definitely not an enemies to lovers, but like a dislike to lovers situation as well. And it was beautifully done, so highly recommend that. And those are all of the books I'm going to talk about today. Let me know what your favorite book of the year has been so far, and what your most disappointing book has been so far. Otherwise, if that is too large of a question, feel free to leave me a pear emoji down below if you don't know what else to comment. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that I know you're there and you're watching, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.